The room was quiet in a way that felt heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. Morning light slipped through the narrow window, landing softly on the worn wooden table where a young man sat with his hands folded. His clothes were clean but old, the fabric thinned by time and effort. He stared at the paper in front of him, his eyes moving across the words again and again, yet his mind struggled to absorb them. It was an offer, simple and ordinary on the surface, but to him it felt like a door that had suddenly appeared in a wall he thought was solid forever. His heart beat faster, not from excitement alone, but from fear. Fear of hope. He had lived long enough without it that trusting it now felt dangerous. Memories crowded his thoughts, nights spent worrying about rent, mornings waking up with the same unanswered questions, the quiet disappointment in his father's eyes when dreams were discussed but never reached. He remembered his mother's tired smile, the way she always said things would get better, even when she knew they might not. That smile had kept him moving, but it had never shown him the way forward. Stood up and walked to the window, pressing his palm against the cool glass. Outside, people moved quickly, each of them carrying their own stories, their own chances. He wondered how many of them had once stood exactly where he was now, holding a single moment that could change everything. His chest tightened as doubt whispered to him. What if he failed? What if he accepted this opportunity and proved everyone right, proving that he was not meant for more? Behind him, a clock ticked steadily, marking time he felt he had already wasted. That sound pushed him back to the table. He picked up the paper with shaking hands, noticing how official it looked, how final. This was not just about him anymore. He imagined a future version of himself, older, tired, explaining to his children why he never tried. The thought hurt more than the risk of failure ever could. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. In that silence, he felt something shift. It was not confidence, not certainty, but resolve. A quiet understanding that this moment would pass whether he acted or not, and that regret would last far longer than fear. His shoulders relaxed slightly as he exhaled, and for the first time that morning, his hands stopped trembling. He signed his name slowly, each letter deliberate, as if carving a promise into the page. When he finished, he sat back and looked at what he had done. Nothing around him had changed. The room was the same, the light unchanged, the world still moving outside. Yet inside him, something had begun. It was small and fragile, but real. One choice, made in a single moment, had quietly set the foundation for a future that would one day lift not just him, but generations after him. The days that followed were harder than he had imagined. The excitement of that signed paper faded quickly, replaced by early mornings and long nights that tested his resolve. He stepped into unfamiliar spaces where he felt small and out of place, surrounded by people who spoke with confidence and certainty. Every mistake felt louder, every silence heavier. He carried doubt like a shadow, always a step behind him, reminding him that he did not belong there, that one signature could not erase a lifetime of struggle. There were moments when he returned home exhausted, sitting on the edge of his bed with his head in his hands. His body ached, but it was his mind that hurt the most. He questioned himself in the quiet darkness, wondering if courage had been a mistake. He thought of walking away, of choosing the comfort of what he already knew over the fear of what he was trying to build. The thought brought temporary relief, but it was quickly followed by shame. He had crossed a line, and turning back now felt worse than failing forward. Slowly, almost without noticing, small victories began to appear. A task completed correctly. A nod of approval from someone he respected. A moment where his voice did not shake when he spoke. Each one was small, barely worth celebrating, yet together they formed something powerful. With every step, he felt a thin layer of confidence settle over his fear. He was still afraid, but now he was moving despite it. He started to see his work differently. What once felt like a burden began to feel like proof. Proof that he could learn, that effort mattered, that growth was not sudden but earned. He stayed late not because he was told to, but because he wanted to understand more. He asked questions even when his pride urged him to stay silent. The room that once intimidated him slowly became familiar, and the faces that once blurred together began to recognize him. At night, he thought about the future again, but this time it felt less like a distant dream and more like a path. He imagined stability, choices, and freedom, not just for himself but for the family he hoped to build. The fear of failure was still there, but it no longer controlled him. Instead, it pushed him to prepare, to work harder, to respect the chance he had been given. One evening, as he walked home under a darkening sky, he realized something had changed. He no longer felt like someone pretending to belong. He felt like someone becoming. The struggle had not broken him, it had shaped him. That single moment of choice had not delivered success overnight, but it had taught him endurance. And endurance, he understood now, was the true beginning of generational success. Time moved forward, not in dramatic leaps, but in steady, demanding steps. Years passed, marked by lessons learned the hard way and sacrifices made quietly. He built his life brick by brick, often without applause, often without certainty. There were setbacks that shook him deeply, moments when progress unraveled and he felt as if he were standing at the beginning again. Losses came, some financial, some emotional, and each one left its mark. Yet he did not retreat. The memory of that first decision stayed with him, reminding him that progress was never a straight line. As his responsibilities grew, so did his awareness of others who depended on him. He became a husband, then a father, and with those roles came a weight that felt both frightening and sacred. Late at night, after the house had gone quiet, he sat alone at the kitchen table, reviewing plans and numbers, worrying about tomorrow. He thought about his children sleeping down the hall, their futures still unwritten. The thought filled him with a fierce determination. He was no longer working only for survival, but for legacy. He began to make different choices, not just bigger ones. He learned patience, understanding that quick wins often led to long regrets. He invested in knowledge, in discipline, and in people. When opportunities came, he studied them carefully instead of rushing. When failure struck, he spoke about it openly, teaching those around him that mistakes were not shameful if they became lessons. Slowly, others started to look to him for guidance, not because he claimed authority, but because his journey spoke for itself. His children noticed the change in him before they understood it. They saw consistency where there had once been uncertainty. They saw effort where there had once been exhaustion. At the dinner table, he spoke to them about choices, about responsibility, and about the power of small actions repeated over time. He never told them he was building success for them. He showed them instead, through his habits, his values, and the way he treated others. There were moments of pride that caught him by surprise. Standing at a school event, watching his child speak with confidence. Listening to questions that showed curiosity instead of fear. These moments felt like quiet confirmations that his struggle had meaning beyond himself. The future he once imagined as a distant hope was now taking shape in the lives growing around him. Understood then that generational success was not measured only in wealth or status. It was built in mindset, in stability, and in the courage to choose differently. That one moment long ago had not just changed his path, it had rewritten the direction of everyone who would come after him. Years later, the results of that single decision could be seen in ways both visible and subtle. The success he achieved was steady, not flashy, but deeply rooted. His home was filled with warmth instead of worry, with conversations instead of silence. The fear that once ruled his thoughts had been replaced by clarity and purpose. He carried himself differently now, not with pride, but with quiet confidence shaped by experience. His children grew into adults who understood the value of effort. They did not fear responsibility because they had watched it practiced daily. They pursued education, skills, and meaningful work with a belief that opportunities could be created, not just hoped for. When they faced challenges, they did not freeze or run. They leaned forward, remembering the example set before them. The foundation he had built gave them something stronger than money, belief in their ability to shape their own future. As time passed, the impact spread beyond his family. He became someone others sought for advice, a reminder that success did not require perfect beginnings. He spoke honestly about struggle, about doubt, and about the moment he almost said no. His story resonated because it was real, because it showed that one brave choice, made in an ordinary room, could echo across decades. In quiet moments, he reflected on how close he had come to walking away from that opportunity. The thought humbled him. He understood that life rarely announces its turning points. They arrive softly, disguised as difficult decisions. What mattered was not that he had been fearless, but that he had acted while afraid. In the end, generational success was not a miracle or a sudden transformation. It was the outcome of one moment of courage, followed by years of discipline, learning, and responsibility. That single choice had broken a cycle and replaced it with possibility. Long after he was gone, the values he lived by would continue to guide those who came after him, proving that one moment, when honored with action, could change generations.